My farm is my sanctuary, a place of peace and quiet, nestled far away from the hustle and bustle of city life, or at least it was. My property has a long dirt road that connects to the main highway, and technically, it's a private easement. For years, my neighbors and I used it respectfully, driving slowly to keep the dust down and ensure the safety of our kids and animals. But that all changed when a new family moved into the recently built Meadowbrook Heights subdivision nearby. And with them came Susan. Susan was the self-appointed queen of her HOA, and she seemed to think her authority extended to my land as well. The first time I saw her, she was a blur of silver Lexus, kicking up a massive dust cloud. As she rocketed down my dirt road, I flagged her down, planning to have a polite chat. I explained that it was a private road and that for safety, we all drive under 10 miles per hour. She just scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "This is the fastest way to the highway. If you don't like dust, maybe you should pave your little path." Then she sped off, leaving me coughing in a cloud of dirt. This wasn't a one-time thing. Susan made a habit of using my road as her personal racetrack multiple times a day. My friendly wave turned into a stern glare, but she just ignored me. I put up private road and slow down signs. The next day, they were gone. I even installed a simple rope barrier. She drove right through it, snapping the rope. My animals were getting spooked. My kids couldn't play outside safely, and my house was constantly covered in a layer of grime. I tried talking to her husband, who just shrugged and said, "Happy wife, happy life," before retreating back inside his perfectly manicured suburban fortress. I knew I had to escalate things, but legally, I called the local sheriff's department. An officer came out, took my report, and even spoke to Susan. For about a day, she slowed down. But then, she was right back at it, sometimes even seeming to go faster out of spite. The sheriff told me that since it was a private road, their ability to enforce traffic laws was limited. It was a civil matter, and I'd have to take her to court, which would be a long and expensive process. I felt completely powerless. My peaceful farm life was being ruined by this one entitled woman. One afternoon, I was cleaning out my old barn and stumbled upon a box of heavy-duty equipment from my grandfather's time. Inside, I found some old, rusted metal strips. They were originally part of a farm harrow used for breaking up soil, but they looked menacing. An idea, a devious and beautiful idea, began to form in my mind. It was time to fight fire with fire, or rather, dirt with spikes. I decided against using anything that would cause permanent, dangerous damage. The last thing I wanted was a lawsuit or for someone to get seriously hurt. My goal wasn't to destroy her car, but to make driving fast down my road an incredibly unpleasant and inconvenient experience. I needed to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. So, I took those old metal strips and got to work. I didn't want to use actual spike strips, but I could create the next best thing. I went to the hardware store and bought several dozen 3-inch deck screws. One then took some sturdy wooden planks and drove the screws through them so the sharp points stuck out the other side. They weren't tire-shredding caltrops, but they were definitely sharp enough to puncture a tire if you hit them at high speed. They were my homemade low-tech spike strips. My plan was simple. I wouldn't leave them exposed. That would be too obvious and dangerous. Instead, I was going to bury them. I identified Susan's favorite racing line on the road, the path she always took. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, I got to work with a shovel. I dug shallow trenches, just a few inches deep, across the road. I placed my screw-covered planks in the trenches, sharp side up, and then carefully covered them with a layer of loose dirt. I smoothed it all out, making it look completely undisturbed. From the driver's seat, the road looked exactly the same as it always had. But underneath the surface, a nasty surprise was waiting. The next morning, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, waiting for the show. It was like watching a nature documentary, waiting for the predator to spring the trap. Right on schedule. At 8:15 a.m., I heard the familiar whine of a Lexus engine approaching at an absurd speed. Susan came flying over the small hill, kicking up her usual plume of dust. She hit the first buried plank. There was a loud thump-pop sound, followed instantly by another. She had hit my trap perfectly. Her car immediately started to swerve as the front tires deflated. She slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt in a chaotic cloud of dust and panic. Right in the middle of my road, the sight was glorious. Susan stumbled out of her car, her face a mask of fury and confusion. She saw her two front tires completely flat and let out a shriek that probably scared the birds a mile away. I strolled casually down the driveway, trying my best to look concerned. "Wow, Susan, looks like you've got some car trouble," I said, barely containing my smile. "What happened? You must have hit something sharp." She pointed a trembling finger at me. You did this. I'm calling the police. I'm going to sue you," she screamed. "Sue me for what?" I asked innocently. "For having a poorly maintained road. I've been meaning to grade it, but it's hard to get any work done with people speeding through here all the time. Gosh, it's a good thing you weren't driving too fast. Imagine if you lost control, someone could have gotten seriously hurt." Her face went from red to purple. She knew I did it, but she couldn't prove a thing. There was no evidence, just a dirt road with a couple of flat tires. The tow truck had to come all the way down the long dirt road, and the driver charged her extra for the off-road recovery. It took hours. I watched the entire spectacle from my porch, sipping my coffee. It was the most satisfying morning I'd had in months. The best part? Susan never sped down my road again. In fact, she avoided it altogether, taking the longer public route to the highway from then on. The peace and quiet returned to my farm. The dust settled, my animals relaxed, and my kids could play outside without fear. Sometimes, the best way to deal with a bully isn't to ask them nicely, but to make their bad behavior have real, immediate consequences. And in this case, the consequences were two very flat, very expensive tires. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe to Care and Conflict for more.